It was about 2 years ago. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was getting into my friend Gareth's car. It was his dad's car and he wasn't supposed to have it in the first place. I don't know how he got hold of it. I remember he had been drinking earlier that night. I knew he wasn't supposed to be driving it, but I remember really needing a lift home because it was late. We had been arguing the whole trip about something stupid, and in a moment of rage, he slammed onto the accelerator hard and tried to do a U-turn. Now that I think about it, I remember it was his way of scaring people into shutting up. He was nuts like that. Gosh, next thing I knew I was being wheeled into a big room on a stretcher. My chest and head felt like I'd been punched in places with metal or something. The next part is really vivid. I definitely remember this. Seconds later, I started to float out of my body and go through this weird tunnel of light, like I was on some weird drug or something. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew that I couldn't control where I was being sucked to. I couldn't stop or turn or anything. Everything seemed fine. For a split second, I thought I was headed towards heaven, but suddenly something happened. I stopped dead in this tunnel, and like a bolt of lightning I started to fall, faster and faster and faster. I felt like I had literally just dropped vertically and was headed towards this sort of black hole. It was so dark I felt I could cut it with a knife. Still falling, I began to hear screams, cries, agonizing pain, horrible laughing, and the most putrid smell you could ever imagine. Then the black mess turned into fire, and I was falling towards a huge furnace. Fire began to consume me. I started screaming. I didn't know where my sound was going, but I knew I was screaming hard. Landing on my back, I suddenly crashed to what seemed like rocks and felt a horrible pain all over my body, or whatever this new form was. Opening my eyes, I suddenly realized I wasn't alone, because creatures, things of some sort of distorted form, started to grasp at me. One by one they grabbed me and started to drag me towards what seemed like a huge black gate. I began kicking and screaming, yelling at the top of my lungs for Allah or Buddha or God, whoever I could remember hearing about in religious education classes, to help me, but still nothing came. I remember one giant creature began to rip at the skin on my back with what seemed like his sharp nails. Another began to tear at my hair so hard I felt the urge to throw up. Another kicked me down and started standing on my chest laughing, teasing me about personal issues he seemed to know about me, such as my mother dying at birth, my sister in prison, and my friend Gareth driving the car that had killed me. I so remember the smell. It was so vile, like rotting flesh and burnt hair. Their raspy laughs and taunts at me were almost drowned out by the roar of the flames around me. I suddenly saw before me people running and screaming, a group of children no younger than 12 years old, crying, each one being terrorized and literally pulled apart by these malevolent beings. I definitely remember suddenly seeing Gareth, the guy in the car with me. He was hung upside down with nails driven into his hands and feet, almost like Jesus on the cross. I had remembered reading about that in class a few weeks ago. The creatures began whipping him simultaneously, all chanting in a language I really didn't understand. Fire had now consumed what he was nailed to, and the flesh on his hands and chest and head had already begun to melt and peel. I looked at his face. He was terrified. He began crying uncontrollably, pleading with them to stop. My body or soul, or whatever you want to call it, suddenly began to burn badly from the fire spread on this ground. I suddenly cried out again, God, please help me. I suddenly realized that the more I cried out God's name, the more they tried to hurt me. The angrier they got, the more agitated and frustrated they became. God, please, I finally begged, seconds before deciding to give up, and suddenly a great suction tore me from their grip and started to carry me back through the tunnel. I suddenly awoke to the sound of a female doctor's voice. I remember her telling me that after 2 hours of resuscitation I had recovered, but Gareth had not. Apparently, as they were trying to revive him, his heart gave way. It just gave up the fight. His time of death had been confirmed half an hour before mine. After months of therapy, trying to describe all I had seen, my friend I met in college, a Pentecostal Christian, explained to me what I had encountered. She counseled me for about 2 weeks, telling me scriptures in the Bible that described hell and outlined everything I had seen. And then one day, there and then, right in the middle of my college campus, I gave my heart to Jesus. To this day I swear I can still smell that rotten smell of burnt flesh and burnt hair. I used to actually get feverish every time I think about Gareth, and where he might be to this day. I still believe I know where he is, and where I don't want his little brother to be, who is now 14 years old. Sharing my testimony with friends and family who didn't believe in all this religious stuff, still claim to this day that, in their opinion, I've seen one or too many horror movies. But this was no movie. There were no credits, no logos at the end of it. No. This was real. All who read this, I pray please let this be a warning to all those who have not accepted Jesus Christ into their hearts. In my near-death experience, I saw what waits for those who reject Jesus. I've seen the horror that is more real than any film or show could ever be. And I praise God to this day that He gave me that second chance so that now I can work for Him. For all those who aren't sure, please don't wait until it's too late to find out the truth. I did. In Jesus' name, call on Him now. Don't wait. I'm 22 years old. I thought I had years ahead of me before anything like this would happen. I was very nearly wrong. God bless all who read this and believe in God and His precious Son. Amen.